All right. Hello, everybody. And we are live. Actually, we're pre-recorded. I'm Dave Darrington. I'm the Director of Customer Education here at Service Rocket, and I'm going to be your host again for another episode of Working Out Loud, where, what we want to do in the show. I always like to frame this up again. Why am I doing this? We're doing a new kind of thing here. We're talking about education. We're talking about software as a service. We're going to have people on this show every week, as long as I can do it, to talk about the problems out loud that we're experiencing and how to solve them. But we're also bringing in software that you may have never heard of, because in the B2B world, business to business, software as a service, SaaS, there's a lot out there. Chances are a lot of you find these tools in the course of your day job. What I'm trying to do is turn that inside out. We're going to talk about these really amazing platforms, really amazing technologies, and have a lot more fun with this. And with that, without further ado, I'm going to invite my friend Brandon here to the show. Brandon, I want you to introduce yourself. And Brandon's from LifeRay. You're the Senior Manager of Customer Education. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, my name is Brandon Pettit. I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to get a chance to talk to you, Dave, and I've learned so much from you guys just over the past several months. One of my coworkers, Eddie Chow, he turned me on to C-Lab, and that really did it for me. I got hooked. I sort of started obsessing. I started buying all of these books and reading more about customer education. So a little bit more about me. I started at LifeRay as a UI intern.
Cool.
And actually, long story short, didn't do too well.
Well, full transparency here. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But one of the other fellows that was hired, I got to work with, and I was teaching him as much as I could to try to get him to ramp up quickly. And one of the executives saw that, and in one of our final conversations for the internship, he said, "Hey, why don't you try out training and we'll see how you do."
Huh.
And that's how I got sort of thrown into training and sort of discovered my calling, if you will. So I went from doing instructor-led trainings to curriculum development to project managing, and just kept going up from there. And so now I find myself in this senior management role. Have convinced some of the executives recently to merge the documentation team, which was a separate team, and the education team together to create a formal customer education function in customer experience. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a journey for sure. So I would say one of the big catalysts here for this change for me was actually several years back. We introduced customer success into the company, and the education team was brought under customer success. I worked with Fred Tsai, who is amazing. He's over at Checker now. And he really introduced me to the concept of engagement, adoption, renewal, expansion, just drilled that into our heads. That's what this is all about. This is how we're going to make a difference. And that was really what started me down this path of trying to understand, okay, how does customer education work in this context? How do we scale that out? Like, sure, we can have these great white glove conversations with the customers one-on-one, but what about the customers that aren't having those conversations? What about the customers that aren't getting this sort of white glove treatment? How do we make sure that they still get an excellent experience? And yeah, that's all of that is the foundation for this newfound enthusiasm, finding out this industry, and just wanting to take it and run with it. So very excited to be here.
Well, I want to pause you there before I ask you more about what your product does. Well, number one, the question I have to ask you is, how were you able to affect this merge? That's a big deal for you and your team to say, I'm going to bring together a customer education function. I hear this happening somewhat frequently, but that's a hard conversation, because you're kind of now going at an executive level, or at least right below it, and reorganizing the company.
Yeah.
How were you able to affect that and sell people on that?
Yeah. So, I could be a pretty pushy guy. And I haven't been afraid to let people know when I think there's a better way of doing things. So I think over the years, and poor Fred, if you were here, he could tell you all about how I've complained. Over the years, as I've seen how things ought to be working together, getting more insight into the business, seeing some of the pre-sales, some of the post-sales, seeing how things could function more efficiently if we just worked together.
We just
Um,
work together.
and then,
Okay.
yeah, and then from a site perspective, so I think one of the things that really represented the distinction between some of these functions was our own website. If a customer were to come to liferay.com, there are other sites that we have representing these other great resources that we have. So the question for me was, why don't we bring this together? And in fact, why don't we bring some of these processes together? Why don't we connect the messaging to the content? Why don't we start, bridging some of these gaps? And so I brought that to one of the executives who worked with me on it, and he had a similar vision.
Hmm.
From a documentation perspective. And so we tried making some shifts earlier in the year to put me into a position where I can start coordinating with a number of groups. And then as we transition to a customer experience department going on sort of in parallel with this move, I decided to talk with some of the leaders and say, hey, what if we started bringing this together? What if we brought together docs and the videos and certification and made this a formal function and aligned with some of the goals of customer success? Because really, we're on the same team, we're on the same page here. We still want that adoption. That's something that we want to drive. We still want that renewal and expansion. We want customers to be successful. That's why we're doing this. And so that was, long story short, convincing enough to the leaders that they said, you know what, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. So here we are.
Okay, Brandon, what I want to commend you for that, because I know that took a lot of work. And it was probably scary too, a little bit, because, how well did you know your executives when you're trying to pitch this to them?
I knew the particular executive I was working with, I knew well enough, but absolutely, it
Good.
was it was terrifying coming in and saying, hey, I think we're not doing things right. Let's do something else. What do you think? It's definitely a little bit intimidating.
Okay, well, I'm asking you these questions because we're gonna go deeper into this in a little bit. This is just the intro and the setup, but I wanted you to tell your story, because this is the true spirit of working out loud. When our customers aren't learning, they could be churning, right? If we're not training, Tom Stoddard says this: if we're not training, we're not retaining, right? I inverted it, but it's hard, I think, and I'm particularly impressed in this case that you've been able to make that play. And then you even said, "Oh, my leaders were kind of thinking the same way." That is what this is saying to me, is that the market is evolving, and the market is starting to go, "Yes, I understand this education thing is a big deal," and you're hearing voices, not just ours or C Labs, but other people out there that are wanting to do the same thing. So that's great, and I'm really excited to hear that companies like LifeRay are actually making the commitment. And it's a commitment. Like you're putting money into this. Before we go any further and get back to that, one of the things I really want to understand more is this is an opportunity for you to talk about LifeRay.
Yeah.
It's not a product I've heard about. Well, I've heard about it actually, but as we get into these things, I really like to learn. And I want to know what your product is about. Why are you doing customer education?
Yeah.
What does the product do? So
Yeah.
can you give us a little bit of an overview for those people who don't know LifeRay yet, might be looking for this is a DXP?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, or tell our audience, why you need this product. What is the problem that I'm trying to solve, and how are we doing that through customer ed?
Yeah. Well, LifeRay really is everything. So it's just the Lego box. You can take it and you can build whatever you want. But recently, I say that half jokingly. Um, recently, we have really put a focus in on creating a DXP, which is, for those of you who are not aware of this term, a digital experience platform.
Yeah,
The
that's what I was looking
intent
for.
here, yeah, the intent here is really to provide a platform where you truly can build any digital experience and integrate with a number of existing platforms that you may have, right? Kind of the one-stop shop of any sort of digital experience you're trying to provide, right? So if that's an application for something like a bank wanting to provide a great application that gives access to all of the sort of financial services that you provide, or If you just want to build a one-stop shop website, or maybe you're a company that does B2B sales, but you also want to have an intranet, you can do all of those things in one platform.
Oh, wow.
So there's really a lot to it. It's really an excellent product. I absolutely love this product. We have a focus on things like manufacturing, insurance, financial services, building things like self-service portals, which is a really broad term. It just means any sort of portal you provide for your customers where they can go and self-serve. They can get the documents they need. They can get the services they need.
Training, education.
Training, education. Yep, exactly. B2B e-commerce features, customer portals, supplier portals for manufacturing, all of those things. It's huge, right? And with that can come, for customer education, right? Frankly, there can come a lot of challenges because there's so much that you can do with this product, that trying to focus down and identify exactly what those aha moments are for your customers when they're adopting, right? It can be so different depending on where you're coming from. You're coming from manufacturing, insurance, FSI. You're trying to build these different types of platforms or digital experiences, something that might be overwhelmingly relevant in one area, maybe less relevant in another, right?
Yeah.
So we have to really work hard to engage with our customers, identify what matters to them in those different segments, and try to provide something that sort of hits down the middle of the road for most of them, and then maybe have some supplemental experiences that can expand on that later. So there's a lot to do with this. I've mentioned when we've chatted before that there's some products I look out on the market and I see some SaaS products, and maybe this is naive of me, but I think, man, that would be so easy. Just look at it, a single focused document management system or a content management system, and that's it. And they do it really well. And I think, oh, wouldn't it be nice? Because we have that, and document management, and database management, and just a ton of things to create this sort of one-stop shop platform.
Okay, let me tag team on that with you.
Sure.
So your lament, which I love, is, oh, I look at this other platform. Here, I'll just name one. I look at Toggl, Toggl. It's a time tracking app that I use and my team uses all the time. Super cheap, real easy, does one thing well: track my time. Makes it mind-numbingly easy for me to do something I hate to do, right? Do I need training on it? Nope. Pretty easy. Is there documentation? Yeah, some. You don't even need that. It's, and I'm bringing this to the surface. This executive voice is, Dave, but my product is so easy to use, it'll never need training. Well, that's rare. Sometimes it's true. But for you and I, this is where, if someone says that, I get angry, because I'm like, well, by you saying that, you're immediately out of touch. And this is where I think we can frame up this discussion.
Yeah.
That you got your picture handy. Do you want to throw that picture up that you were trying to show me before?
Oh, sure.
I want to put that up here on the screen to frame up our discussion and where we're going to go. And I'm not going to steal your thunder, so I'll let you share it. We'll take a moment here while I drink a little water.
This guy here.
All right. That. Okay. I want to say this first, because when you're talking to me on LinkedIn, we're just chatting back and forth. You had this concept of like, hey, what, customer education is kind of like the Spiderman of, I think you'd said the enterprise world, but it's the SaaS world. It's,
yeah.
And I'd never heard anybody say that before. So you get attribution. Customer education is a Spiderman.
Yeah, let's get that going around, everybody.
Yeah, I'm Spider-Man. Spider-Man's fun, cares about everybody, friendly neighborhood. It's actually really astute. So okay, well, I'm gonna take that out here. But now let's talk about this. And let's talk out loud about this.
Yeah.
I want to read a quote that you'd sent me that kind of frames up where I know and I think you would like to take this discussion about the concept of working, of evolving your role and becoming a leader and being that Spider-Man. And now let's think about the Spider-Man journey too. Like Spiderman was like origin story is pretty, you got a geeky kid in high school, you can go Spider-Gwen too. Either way, the same motif is I'm a smart kid, get bit by a radioactive spider, backstory there, okay, whatever. But now I've got these powers, and with great power is great responsibility, right? But Spider-Man could do all kinds of things, you know. And I like this concept of like you're bringing together webs, you're keeping your New York community in shape. Everybody's happy. Okay, going back to your quote. I've been finding myself drifting away from Wi-Fi as a product. Okay, we're not talking about leaving, but as a product. And now you're investing a lot of time building a team, selling the concept of what we are calling education proper, strategizing. Okay, yes. Okay, that is something that I've gone through, and I think everybody in our market, if they get in a role that we call customer education, they feel this pretty soon. I did. I started off as an IC. You know, I was just me. I did that several times. So now you're like, all right, well, now how do I was wondering how you straddle that as a leader. Do you sit in with product to make sure you're always in the know? You know, or is this something you empower your team to do? You know, okay, let's talk about insights there. Let's talk about like, this is something to lead with. How do we sell customer education to our organization? You're so passionate, Brandon. I mean, you did it. You did it. You got to that first level of, well, now you've got a senior manager role and you're there. We talked about how you did that, but now we want to talk about like, okay, more in the how, like we saw how you did it, but let's talk out loud generally how people can bootstrap themselves up to be that person who now is a leader leading people. And what is it, the things that you're going to do? Okay, we framed that up good enough. So go back to your story. I want you to tell me again, just like high level. You were not, did you start off as an independent contributor, just kind of doing stuff, and then you found yourself, now I have a team? How many people do you have on your team?
Yeah, so going back to the beginning of customer success, because that's really when things started changing.
Right.
So there's a part of it here that's different for me particular. I don't know if you want to get into all of this, but I think it was meaningful to my journey in particular. I know I've heard on C-Lab and a lot of these conversations time and time again, you always hear the concept of the redheaded stepchild. And one of the things that connected me most with C-Lab was the first time I heard that, and I went, "Oh, I've been saying that for years."
I know how it's a sensitive topic. We're trying to change that, but yeah.
Right. Well, so I think that's what changed with customer success, right? So before that, I was a project manager, and it's because I was kind of scrappy in my earlier days. Every time I'd see something that wasn't quite right, even if it wasn't really in my role, like, hey, our training site looks kind of junky, or something's not positioned right, or the information's inaccurate, or something like that, I would just fix it. Or I would, in some cases, I would go on the site, go into the source code, change it, and then be like, hey, it should look like this. Can someone fix this, right? So I just wanted to fix things. It was just something that I felt very passionate about, and over time, that's what led me to being a project manager for the curriculum itself.
Right.
Because if there were issues at the training, it would be problematic for me if I couldn't just fix it quickly, especially because I was actually out in front of the customers, right? So when customer success came into LifeRay and we were brought into that, one of the reasons I brought up Fred earlier is because Fred was really the first person who was like, hey, what do you want to be in 10 years? And I was kind of shocked and didn't have an answer. I don't know. I like training. I like teaching customers. I like making sure that they're successful. Something that I did when I would deliver trainings, I'd say, hey, reach out to me if you have any questions. And we would have 100 thread emails with questions from customers, because I would always respond. I loved doing it. It was something that I wanted to make sure that they were getting the most out of, whatever experience they're having with LifeRay. And that was a pivotal point for me. And from there, he actually was the one who promoted me to being a manager of education delivery at first. And that's where I formally got my own team, right? And that was the team of curriculum developers.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the beginning. That was the beginning of sort of getting my own team and figuring out, okay, what does people managing look like in this? Now I need to start talking at a higher level to executives. How am I selling this? What am I explaining about education? I can't just assume that it's good, even though it's a good assumption. I need to demonstrate the value. And
Hmm.
that was when connecting it to customer success concepts really happened for me, right? Engagement, adoption. We can start making some of those correlations, right? If customers are more engaged, they're more likely to adopt. If they're adopting the product, they're seeing the value, they're more likely to renew. If they're renewing and we can continue showing them value, they're going to expand. There opens more opportunities. It's good for the business. It's good for the customer. It's good for everybody, right?
Yes.
And that's really when I started taking it and running with it and saying, okay, this isn't just something I like to do. This isn't just something I want to fix. There is there is something about this customer education thing that benefits everybody. And then I started saying, oh wow, pre-sales. If we can convince customers before they even sign the dotted line that we can support them with our education content, and they can see that what our marketing is talking about can be showed to them with the content, they can actually do it, then that's going to encourage them to sign the dotted line, and then they'll have a better experience, and they're even more like, it just boom 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 boom, everything started coming together with customer success for me, right? And so
Yeah.
that's why I'm very passionate, when the question comes up, where should education live? Customer experience, customer success, for me it's always right there, because I think for me personally, that's where I really started grasping the benefit of how all of this works together for everybody.
Well put. That, and I have to say that's the start. So we're talking here about how we selling it, how we pitching it.
Right.
And I think what you've stumbled upon, and I mean, obviously, some of this has been going on. This is the thing that goes on in the heads and the hearts of everybody who is like you. And this is why at C Lab and everybody that's involved in this whole customer education community right now have the same feeling like, okay, me, Adam, Alessandra, Shelly, D, like all the people that we have, Melissa Van Pelt, um, Courtney from HubSpot, many of us are now kind of like orbiting together, and I can go on and on and on. What we're trying to do is be the stewards of the next generation and help people to understand the things that you came to conclusions with
Yeah.
as a new leader. So this is where we're stepping in. You're a new leader. You may have been a manager before. I've had this career where I'm a manager, then I'm an IC, and an IC manager, director. You jump around in your life. But I've felt that this role, this transition that you've made is one of the harder ones. It's hard because, okay, now you're suddenly a manager. Now you've got a team. Can I ask a question? I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, but was this your first manager role formally? Or you
Uh,
had before?
for the customer success part, yes, formally.
Okay.
Now, to be fair to that, even as a project manager, I was acting more like a manager
Of
than
course. Yeah.
maybe I should have. I don't know, but I had more of that direct connection with the team because we were pretty tight knit at that point. So going into a manager role didn't feel like as big
Scary or
of a
anything.
transition. It was
That's
really
great.
just logistics, right? People management logistics that I needed to figure out.
Right. But the point I wanted to make is not that you didn't have experience sets. It's that you're going through a transition.
Sure.
And that at first I could feel your passion just oozing out of you when you're talking about that. You're like, oh my gosh, I understand it now. If we do education in context of the language of software and customer success, you nailed what this is. Education can be traditional. It's who showed up, what do they do? Did they get an A? Okay. It's education for education's sake.
Right.
You're measuring people on how well they consumed education. We don't
Right.
do that. We don't
Right.
care about that. In fact, what we care is that I gave you this content. It's educational. It might not be, but it's mostly educational. And you took that and actually did your job. Right. So we're like skipping all of that formative years BS that you went to school for. No, we're not doing it. We're giving you the education you need to do the things you need to do. And that's even more complicated because your product, LifeRay, is broad. So when you talk about educational context, there's two different flavors of it. One I call enablement. Enablement is more like, okay, I'm focusing on this thing, this use case, and I want everybody to understand how to use that use case and how to sell it, how to tell other people how to use it, and how to use it yourself. Education, I think, nestles together with enablement as strings of learning, right?
Yeah.
Enablement can be a use case. Education is taking that collection of use cases and layering in some more stuff, like how to actually use the product. What are the buttons I click? You go to documentation for that, and building and layering upon it. So now I can do anything with your platform. It's platform.
Yeah.
Now, the conversation I wanted to have with you, though, is that you're finding yourself understanding more and more every day. The transition to a manager is one thing. Project manager is similar. You keep them work getting done, right? But you're also now kind of functioning as a visionary and a higher level leader.
Yeah.
This is the thing that gets lost.
Yeah.
You've got to convince people. You've got to get people's time, like subject matter experts. You got to go to the support team who's seeing all kinds of tickets come through, and they haven't heard this yet from you that, oh my gosh, I can decrease your ticket log by giving well-trained customers.
Yep.
Can I prove it? Yeah, absolutely. I can prove it. You just got to set it up.
Yeah.
So how are you finding yourself? Where are the things, like if you were to tell me an area you struggled with getting someone on board, what was it like? I love that. I'll share my stories too, but let's do short storytelling time. How hard is it to convince some people that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, it can be difficult, in an organization where everybody has great ideas and they feel very strongly about their ideas. And again, going back to this idea of the site example that I gave earlier is a representation of, for lack of a better word, the silos, right? You have different groups who are very passionate about their particular topic, so they create a site for it. And then someone else who has a similar topic, they create a site too. And when you come in and you say, why aren't these working together? Or in fact, can we be working these together so that they function to provide some sort of a journey for any audience? And this doesn't just encompass customers proper. This is also for internal teams and partners as well, right?
Yeah.
So that, I think that's a good representation of what I'm seeing. And the challenge is, of course, convincing those teams that they should be willing to step away from some of this hard work that they've done over here in order to provide something better, a better experience, right? And having to sell that vision to the different groups can be very challenging. And it's definitely something that I've struggled with, right? I can talk all day about the beauty of this consistent pre to post sales experience. And I can even get people to nod heads, and I can get people to agree with me and say, yeah, that sounds fantastic. But then when it comes down to, the rubber needs to meet the road, we need to make a change. It's like, well, we do things this way, we do things this way. And so that's definitely been, especially for let's say the last year or so. I think the way I have tackled that is by pitching the vision to essentially two executives, VPs, directors, trying to get them on board with the idea, getting everybody on the same page. And once they're on board with the same page, then we can start talking about execution. How do we actually do this in practice? You agree with me? This is the right thing to do, right? We're good. We're on the same page. Okay. Something needs to change because that's not happening right now, right? So what are those things? How do we identify those things? And then we start getting the teams to actually execute. So I think one of the earlier fruits of that is the formal merge to begin with, right? Because documentation and training were distinct functions, right? And getting people on board to say this shouldn't be distinct. We should be building this out in the way where documentation might be providing us the map of what you can do with LifeRay, and then education adds on that GPS. I know we've heard that. I forget where that was, but maybe that was from Adam's book.
No,
was that from you? That was you. All right.
Yay, attribution. Yeah, it came up, but yeah, it was a map. And actually, Adam and I had put that in a deck that we presented together at DevLearn in 2019.
Yeah.
So it was kind of both of us in that. But we've been bringing back that terminology, and you hit it right.
Yeah. the map, the GPS. I've been using that all the live long day. So thank you.
Well, it helps frame
Yeah.
it up when you have those kind of things. I think the harder thing, Brandon, is that you're trying to sell to people that I heard several things in there, like, well, this is the way we do it. And, people will just silo and they will do their own thing. And you're talking about your course of action is I'm having conversations with them. I'm learning from them. I'm saying, oh, why aren't we collaborating? Why aren't these things working together? And that's the hardest thing at our level, because like I've been an IC and then I've been a leader, and then I've been a senior leader, but I've had a hard time getting above the line. And let's transition a bit, because I want to stay with this concept. This is a hard concept, because I feel like if there's anybody in this world right now that has the ability to make a difference in how customers use our products, it's executive leadership.
Absolutely.
What I mean by that is, okay, let me ask you a question. You might not even know. I do know for a fact that your company actually did do some, I think we did some work with us. So we have this thing called an advisory workshop, a strategic advisory workshop, where I can show you the page here. I'm just going to put this up. I'm not trying to toot my horn too much, but this is a branded show.
You can toot a little. It's fine.
Branded with Brandon. We have a page here you can go to, and it talks about, and let me do share as well. What I'm really obsessed with. Oh, what am I not? This is not right. Slides. I don't want to import. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to show you this right now. Anyway, but we have a program that we go through all the steps, and we think about the life cycle of a customer, and we think about what is the customer experience as they start in sales, and they move, and somebody in sales says, oh yeah, the product can do this, and it can't. Okay. And then you go to the next thing, and well, we're in pre-sales, and we're doing some, planning and implementation, and well, didn't come up that the customer had thought they had this and they didn't, and they get down the road, and now there's contest because, well, they didn't know, and the salesperson didn't know then, and now we're in onboarding, and then we're in adopt, and so all these things are going on, and every step of the way, if we lose sight of the customer's educational journey, and that's haphazard, it's broken upon, really all we can measure is the outcome. Did customers go to consume our training? What training did they consume, and how did it move the needle? And I'll have to say that, gosh, looking at the stats and all the industry reports, we're not doing a good job across the industry. And whose fault is that? I don't really want to ascribe fault, but there is a solution in it that comes from executives talking the talk about education and getting connected with the teams that are building it and working to pull those teams together so that you have ROI.
Yep.
That's hard. And I'm not pointing a finger to say, executive, you got to do this. No, what happens though, is that if we flip the script, and here's something that I've found really works well. And I learned this from one of the vendors that I work with. They did a QBR, and it talked about everything that part of what my program was doing, focused on, the learning platform. But I would take that deck and said, okay, how many people did we train this month? Not trained. How many people went through our system? How many people took on-demand training? How many people went to like individual custom training? What was the ROI on that? And then I started showing decks like, oh gosh, I got to pull this one up if I can. Where you have on one side of the screen customers that had not taken training, right? Accounts that had not taken training. And let's put it in context of time to first value. Time to first value is the measure. That customers are adopting. This is the first time that they've really started to use it. You can see a big spike in product usage. How long did it take you to get there? Well, without training, the measurements that I had showed it was like 130 days. So 4 months. With training, it was like 30 days, a month. So that's 4-to-1 decrease in time. That's huge. And that was attributable indirectly, but correlated with my educational work, because you could see it. They took it or they didn't. And then you can measure that for adoption, churn, retention, all these things. But the problem is if you don't get to the executive level where they say, well, Brandon, okay, I see what you're saying but how do you get me ROI? What do you say? Like, well, I need to be able to measure that. So we need to do X. We need to do all these really complicated things. I've got to go to my data team. I need to get to know them. We're going to go out for dinner or lunch or something and get to know each other. They need to understand the value of this educational data. If you look at the stats from most of the companies that are out there doing this, it's a huge boost in revenue even. Like I've seen 10, 15% increase in revenue. That's a lot of money when you're talking mega millions.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's get into that. Like, how are you working with execs and how are they coming back and supporting you in your journey to do this?
Yeah, I mean, part of the initiative to begin with is getting some of this data. So something that I've mentioned before with my team is that, even in customer success, we got into the habit of reporting more in a more formal, structured way that we hadn't been doing before. But most of it was vanity metrics, right? Or what I call vanity metrics.
Like what?
So things like, monthly active users or subscriber count on YouTube or training revenue or things like that, right? They're not bad metrics, but they really didn't get down to asking deeper questions, right? I think one of the things that really stood out to me with some of the books that I've been reading, again, I'm primarily going to be referring to Customer Education by Adam. Is it Avramescu? Avramescu, that's right. Okay. But I believe it was in there when he started asking deeper questions, like not how much traffic are you getting to a document, but rather, is it doing the job? Is it helpful, right? Because we might assume that traffic means that it's going to be helpful. But if you have no way of understanding value, then it could be that there's a lot of people searching for an answer, but you're not actually providing that answer, right? So a lot of people will land on the doc, but that doesn't mean that they're getting what they need, right? So digging into whatever you're providing, whether it's documentation, whether it's learning paths or instructor-led training or virtual instructor-led training or whatever, asking deeper questions, being able to ask deeper questions, and then connect that to the behavior that we're seeing with customers, right? And right now, frankly, in the position that we're in right now, we don't have some of that information, at least as much as I want it, right? Now that I'm sort of, being introduced to this world of understanding the larger impact on the bottom line of the business, I'm like, okay, where do we find this? Where do we find this? And so part of this initiative is saying, hey, executives, this is the kind of data I'm looking for to prove to you that this is going to make a difference. I already believe it does. I'm already going to pitch you the vision. You agree with the vision. We're on the same team. Now I'm going to prove it to you by showing you the data, right? And I'm working with the team, even as we speak, to start getting that information from different groups, right? Because we can get some of this information. You already mentioned support, right? Ticket deflection is a big and easy one, right? Connecting documentation to our support team and figuring out ticket deflection and what's the cost reduction if we can sort of raise the bar for our customers in terms of them understanding so they don't have to create tickets. Things like that, getting data from customer success where we're getting direct customer insights, even getting some information or data from marketing or sales to determine what kinds of things we're selling, what's the messaging, and pulling all of that together. That's where I got the Spiderman idea, right? Pulling all this together to prove that once we bring this together, we understand our customers and we're delivering value to them. We're able to audit ourselves. We're going to say, is this content actually working? And if it is working, great, we can continue to push this. If it's great for some people, but it's not being found, how do we address that? If it's being found, but it's not actually doing the job, how do we address that? Then we can not only start making more proactive and strategic decisions and not just doing stuff, which is where we kind of come from, right? We're just like, well, we assume everything needs to be documented, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a big product and there's a lot of things you can do. So everything needs to be documented. But we've never asked the question why until recently, right? Why does everything need to be documented? Is that what customers are actually doing? When they read this documentation, is it actually providing value? Are they even reading the documentation? Are we seeing an impact on the other side? Are they adopting more? How long are they staying with us? Are they churning, right? Are they at risk? Any of those kinds of questions, we need to pull that all together. So anyway, all of that to say, I think right now in my journey, the struggle is um, identifying where those gaps are and then filling those gaps and continuing to prove value over time to the executives that I'm working with. So that was a long-winded answer, but
No, that was a well-winded answer, because what you did though is you've narrated the complex journey that you have as a customer education leader. And this is the point where you go from being a customer education manager. And I don't say this to be offensive to anybody in my network or audience. You go from a manager keeps the team happy. Your job is to be a servant leader to help give you're doing one-on-ones. You're doing all kinds of stuff. You're making sure everybody has what they need. A leader, your leadership hat is palpably different and requires you to do things that aren't necessarily the day-to-day tasks. So what you're doing is, when you're talking about gaps, okay, I remember this all the time. I would be fighting and struggling to get the information I need to say, okay, forget this. I'm going to go get leader 1, leader 2, leader 3 together in a room. They're not getting out until I get some answers here. And I'm say, look, I know you're busy. I know you have teams doing all this stuff, but I need something from you. We need to build a connective tissue. I need you okay. One of my typical complaints is with customer success managers. Love them to death. I love customer success. I grew up in customer success. I lived at Gainsight for years. But one of the natural tendencies of a customer success manager is to train, because it feels good, it provides value. And there's no argument you'll get from me about either one of those points. But the argument you get from me is that, okay, let's say you're maturing. Your life ray is in a place right now that you're growing up. You've got a pretty good sized team. You've got a decent set of managers, a decent bench. Do you want them to train anymore? No. Why? There's your underlying question. Why do I want them to train? That's a harder sell. Now, if an executive doesn't support that why, or doesn't see it, and says, you, CSM, do whatever it takes to keep your accounts. And if they're saying that in an individual context, like, you, Brandon, let's role play. I'm your manager and VP of customer success. Brandon, you got to do anything to save the accounts. We've got some people who are churning. You got to get in there and have those, renewal calls. You've got to win them. Okay, well, that's not all your job. You're not there to train. You're not going to do the best job at it. You could try. Now you're staying up late at night. You're building your own deck. You're doing all this stuff. When you have Brandon's team there, who's been churning, well, don't use that in customer success, toiling away at building really great content that hits exactly to what the customer needs. So then the challenge, the role is, we need to get up to the executive level, and they're constantly saying, hey, look, this is our education goal. We're teaching people to do these things so they don't call you support. Or we need to teach the customer now. I'm an exec. It's like, hey, Brandon's built this whole program for onboarding. CSM, why aren't you using that? I need you to keep talking and keep the connective tissues. I call that change management. Really, it's where, if you're doing things right, you will be at the presence of team meetings and stuff like that throughout your company. But at some point, your leadership will have dashboards in Salesforce or whatever to show that they're talking about, hey, how is our NRR affected by the campaign that we did in customer education to roll out this new cohort training? Well, Jane, we did this and this and this, where they're talking about it.
Yeah,
that's where we need to be. And if your leaders are doing that, you will be successful. If they're not doing that, you could be in where I've been in times where people are telling me what to do, what training to develop. And I don't know anybody who can tell me what training to develop if they haven't done the research to figure out what gaps to fill.
Exactly. Well, that's part of sort of building the machine, so to speak, right? As we've been lovingly referring to it internally. Because we need to, we're talking about this customer centric way of prioritizing our entire process, but the content we're delivering, right? But how do we be customer centric if we don't actually know what our customers are needing, what they need, right? And so it's interesting. Some of the ways that I'm trying to be creative about this, even now, is if we have my direct manager now. Actually, he's a very, very technical guy. He understands LifeRay in a way that few people on the planet understand. He's great, and he still does programs sometimes where he goes out and he trains because, frankly, he needs to, because nobody else can do it like he can, right? So we get creative about it. We say, okay, fine. Um, it'd be nice to get the stuff off your plate, but if we're going to do this for the time being, don't make these one and dones. How do we record these? How do we chop these up into videos? How do we create learning paths out of these? How do we make this more meaningful and scalable than just doing the one and done with essentially a CSM training, right?
Yeah.
So as we're building the machine and we're trying to get better insights on our customers and provide more value to them and prioritize content to really hit that value, we're also finding other ways to take advantage of some of these experiences that are happening, like what you described with the CSMs, and turn that into valuable content now. Because if a CSM has to go and have that conversation with a customer now, that means our customers need that information, right? So
Yeah.
instead of what's the word, recreating the wheel, or reinventing
Yeah.
the wheel, by saying, oh, that's nice, now let's go write formal content for it, we're like, just record it and we'll edit it out and we'll make sure that it works and we'll build something out of this, right? So yeah, it's an interesting experience right now as we're sort of progressing with this concept in LifeRay and trying to figure out how do we build the plane as it's flying, so to speak, right?
Hmm.
How do we get these insights, but how do we take advantage of what we're doing now and try to scale this out little by little? So eventually it's just a well-oiled machine and we're able to turn this stuff out, quickly with high value to benefit, again, this entire ecosystem.
I really like how you're talking about that, Brandon, and where those are really good plays, and I don't think they're used enough. It's not about perfection. A well-trained instructional designer will always want to go back to build this beautiful course with all this stuff in it, all the bells and whistles and polish. We don't have time for that in our industry.
Oh, I know. I
don't.
was that guy.
I was too. I was too. It's hard not to be that, but what we have to do is actually be responsive and agile. And what we're saying on this show is like the Spiderman thing. I'm going to bring that up because we need to wrap up. But I love your idea of the Spiderman for SaaS. I don't think a lot of people have seen this well enough. I don't think they've seen this enough in action. That everybody's sold on what customer success can do, and if you listen to an episode that we did with Nick Mehta, that was really a critical moment for me, and seeing an executive at one of the highest levels to say, no, I acknowledge this as a function of customer success where we have to have it. It's the core of success to educate.
Yep.
But yet it's one of the most forgotten and left behind things that you can get. And people are like, well, I don't care, or I don't know, or can we do that later? No, like just go, just start, just do, and we'll get there. But please be at our side. Please be there to say, our role here is hard. We're actually this glue, that's going through, and we're the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man saving you from the enemies, Doc Ock and stuff that are out there trying to screw everything
constantly getting blown up.
You're constantly getting blown up. You're getting your mask knocked off, and like it's insane. But that's our job. Our job is to build that mesh, and we often feel like it's a radical. Like I bring up this term a lot, the hero mentality that sometimes we get, and sometimes we get in SaaS, and everybody gets in SaaS. I'm just going to do and solve this thing. We're at a point where we can't always do that. We need to be looking top down and saying, okay, this customer education program here, Brandon's job is to go out there and Spider-Man this thing up. And you got to bring in support and bring in sales and bring in, and let's do an analysis, understand where we're at and where we're going and how we're going to do these things. Your strategic function.
So we're really getting to the point that this isn't really about Spider-Man as much as it's about the Avengers, is what you're saying.
Hey, I like that. We are Spider-Man. Who's that? No, yeah. It kind of is. I mean, we're there to solve a different kind of a problem that SaaS companies don't know they have until it's too late.
Yeah.
And that's, how do you glue together the educational narrative? How do you use this thing? What are the use cases? Why do I need to know them? Am I going to look at your product, LifeRay, and be able to approach it in any kind of a way that makes sense? Because there's so much I can do with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think one of the most meaningful, I guess, insights I came to early on, before even coming to customer success and sort of diving into this entire world, was talking with a manager several years ago and saying, doesn't it make sense that if people know how to use your product, they're going to use it? And if they don't, they're not. It sounds basic, but like, if I know how to use Microsoft Word, I'm going to use Microsoft Word. I'm not going to use something else. Like, I don't need to. I know how to use it, right? I'm going to keep adopting that. And if they update it, it might be irritating here and there, but I'm going to keep using it because it's what I know, right? So is it important that we make sure that customers really understand the value of the product and how to use it and what it can be used for, so that they'll keep using it instead of something else? Again, it was very basic back then, but I think that was also sort of a key pivotal point for me in understanding why, sort of instinctually, why education is so important. Because when you use your phone, if you're like, hey, I want a notes app, or I want some way to track tasks, right? Uh,
mhm.
the app that is the easiest to learn, the highest recommended, something you can pick up quickly, or it has a good onboarding experience, or whatever, right? The app that is going to provide you with what you need and have some sort of an educational experience for you, most likely in-app in the case that I'm referring to. That's going to be what you use, and it's probably going to be what you stick with, right? Unless there's something that comes along that's better and has a better educational experience, right? So,
You got it.
yeah.
Oh, well put. And on that note, we'll start wrapping up. So at the end of this, I always like to say thanks for joining us. This show, if you're interested and you're watching and you want to be on too, just like Brandon here, these are the that I love. Brandon, you did a wonderful job, like talking about the problem that you have, talking about how you solve, you're solving it, and you're doing that every day. And this is a tough topic. We're in a new market, we're in a new industry, we're learning to spread our wings, and we have to learn to become these leaders too. So Brandon, you're at LifeRay. So that's, let me put some links up on the screen here to make sure people know where you're at. No, I thought I had all these up here already. I did not. There's your LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to contact you, you can find them. You're going to find you on LinkedIn easily because it'll be streaming directly. You could just click on and reach out and have a chat. I am at this as well. If you want to find more about our managed services, one cool thing is LifeRay, actually, I think you did one of our strategic workshops. You may have predated you, but back when Bill was here, and it was an amazing thing. And you know what? I have to say that it worked for you because you are talking the language, and probably because of who you are, you're talking the language of customer success. You've got a strategy. You're really crushing it. So anything else you'd like to tell our audience before we check out for the day?
I don't think so. We covered a lot of stuff here. So thanks so much, Dave, for having me. Love getting a chance to chat with you, and happy to chat with anybody who wants to reach out.
All right. Well, please do. And thanks again for joining. Get out there, make your connections, build your programs, contact us if you need more. Thanks again, everybody. Cheers.
Bye.